level.
You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the capitalist corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the capitalist corner.
Welcome, everybody, to the Capitalist Corner. I'm your host, Mark Pellegrino, and also the chairman of the American Capitalist Party, along with my co-host and vice chair of the American Capitalist Party, Michael Leibowitz, who is also the host of so many and sundry shows. Michael, you want to talk about what's going on with Rational Egoists, with Everyday Ethics?
Well, Everyday Ethics is on fire. We have a great show every day, 2:30 Eastern time, every weekday, I should say. Persephone is absolutely kicking ass on that show. She is, I can't tell you how happy I am with her on that show. Much better than I ever expected. She's absolutely wonderful. And I always forget when I'm on my phone to turn down the volume. So then it comes over here.
Boomer adjacent. You are boomer adjacent. But go ahead, keep singing Persephone's praises.
But yeah, no, she's wonderful. It's a great show. I think we're doing great. And, I'm looking forward to continuing it, and I'm hoping that you now go to X and share this program.
I am trying. By the way, there it goes. It finally came up.
Yeah. So I have to do something extra now to get it to go live. I have to go there and click it. But either way, also I should have an episode coming out soon. We're going to be discussing libertarians and immigration. Should be a great episode. I'm hoping to get that out maybe Friday. So, we've got. We also have a great show.
We also have a great show coming up on Saturday. Should we talk about that a little bit?
The Self-Made Soul. We're going to be discussing James Allen's classic, As a Man Thinketh. I can't
Guys,
complain.
if you can read that out there in the audience, it's only about 35 pages or so. It's a real short read. I think you'll be inspired by it. You'll certainly be inspired to ask some questions. And
actually, about 65 pages, but
oh, really? My copy was pretty short, so I don't know if I got some. Why would they abridge?
No, it depends on how you page it. It's a short book, and it's very, very good. And I think that $5 is within the teal, whatever it is here, region, I guess. We have a €5. A super sticker from I Am Regina.
Thank you, dear. Thank you for that super sticker. We got so much to talk about, Michael. I mean, holy crap. There is Bad Bunny fallout. Can we just talk about that a little bit? So
we can.
We alluded to it a little bit yesterday because there were accusations going on from some Republicans out there that Bad Bunny talked all kinds of smack when he in that other language that so many of us couldn't understand, in Spanish. He said vile, horrible things, and he needed to be called out for it. Apparently, according to Carlos, who speaks fluent Spanish, none of that actually happened. He didn't actually sing the lyrics from the song as they were written, but improvise something else in there that was not anything like the lyrics before. So the accusations by the Republicans, which continue to circulate on social media, are in fact bullshit.
Right.
But they want to go further with this, Michael. I mean, they are stomping their feet, and now maybe because 121 million people watched Bad Bunny and only 2 million people watched the alternative show.
Can I just share something with you quickly? I've seen people talking about how wholesome the TPUSA event was, and they're criticizing Bad Bunny's language, even though he didn't use that language there, but he does have songs that are dirty and whatnot. So I made a post on Facebook today. These are the same people that are criticizing Bad Bunny have incessantly defended the president of the United States, who said he can grab women by their genitals. Bragged on that same tape about trying to get a married woman to make out with him. Has bragged on Howard Stern about sneaking into or strolling into women's dressing rooms. Swears quite frequently on the open mic. And they also support, this Kid Rock. Now, look, he said these things long ago, some of them. But if you're going to be judging this, right, if you're going to judge somebody, then be consistent. Now, Kid Rock frequently said of the Olsen twins when they were 14 years old, "Why is every guy in America waiting on these chicks to turn 18? If there's grass on the field, play ball." Right?
Whoa.
Hold on, hold on.
Oh.
He also has a song that says, young ladies, I like 'em underage." See, some say that's statutory, but I say it's mandatory. Now, that's from 20 something years ago. He could have changed since
Whoa.
then. But at TPUSA, he's saying this. "This is for the questions that don't have any answers, the midnight glancers and the topless dancers, the gander freaks, cars packed with speakers, the G's with the 40s and the chicks with the beepers, the northern lights and the southern comfort, and it don't even matter if their veins are punctured, all the crackheads, the critics, the cynics, and all my heroes in the methadone clinic. All you bastards at the IRS, for the crooked cops and the cluttered desks, for the shots of Jack and the caps of meth, half pints of love and the fifths of stress, for all the for hookers all tricking out in Hollywood, and for my hoods of the world misunderstood, I said it's all good and it's all in fun." So that's the wholesome sort of response that the right is putting out. I mean, come on, just stop with the hypocrite. Yeah, I know, Akira, the left, and we discussed this the other day. That I pushed back on the idea with Mark that Bad Bunny was trying to promote individual rights. No, it wasn't. He's not promoting unity. He's not promoting family values. But they also, well, they probably would if they were in power. But right now, what we're actually going to get to is there are actually congressmen who believe that Bad Bunny said the things that he did not say and are calling for an FCC investigation into NBC. So go ahead, Mark, take over with that. But hold on, we've got a whole bunch of, we've got a $35 czar from Persephone. She hates it. I know it's a grant or a rand or something. But it's $35 from the lovely Persephone. Thank you so much, Persephone. We're going to call it a czar because that's what we want to do. And, we know South Africa is largely backwards and they don't have good names for the money. So go ahead, Mark.
Kathy says Kid Rock is a waste of space and always was. Okay. Well, yeah, look, tribalism is a mental illness, folks. I mean, it demands that you conform to whatever the tribe is saying, regardless of how irrational it is or how easily disprovable it is, just because you are a member of that tribe. So we here at Capitalist Corner are anti-tribalistic. We are pro-individual. So we can always stand outside of these tribes and comment on them, I think, with some rational precision, because we don't buy the tribal nonsense, man. Yeah, so the FCC, as many of you know, Federal Communications Commission, was formed by Franklin Roosevelt, and its ostensible purpose was to regulate the airways because it was a finite resource that needed to be doled out by the government, needed to be overseen by the government. Of course, as time has gone on and we've progressed, this becomes an increasingly impossible position to hold. But this was their ostensible reason for being. But Roosevelt used it, Michael, in the same way that Trump seems to be using it today, which is as a means of, at the time, he was attempting to quash dissent, public dissent about the New Deal. And he was trying to spread the New Deal as much as possible through the states, making the states dependent on federal patronage. And anyone on the airways who dissented, well, their license would come up for review. And of course, they would have issues with licensing their station. The same thing is going on with the Trump administration. And also, Michael, a strange perversion of the concept of free speech, where free speech applies only to certain mediums and not to others. Now, I don't know how they're squaring this circle, but they're doing it. I think Rand probably summed it up how they're doing this rather well. But talk a little bit about how the FCC is being used in this case to cudgel dissent.
They have these rules, I guess, that you can't use certain language between the hours of 6 a.m. or and 10 p.m.
10
because the children 10 p.m. because the children might see this, and we have to just limit everybody's freedom because a child might see something rather than have the parents just not have the child watch. But yeah, I don't know what the original interpretation of the First Amendment would be in these cases. I'm inclined to think that these things are unconstitutional, but I'm very confident that they're a violation of individual rights, constitution or no constitution. If you don't want to watch, don't watch, right? It's that simple to me. And, one of these guys, this congressman, what's his name? Ogles, I think his name is. Actually said that if you challenge or if you degrade the culture of this country, you're going to face consequences. Like, screw you, dude. That's not what government is here for, right? And then there's the problem, of course, that it's, completely arbitrary. I mean, there's no definitive set of rules where you can say, okay, if you do this, this is the consequence. And as we're seeing, this is entirely political, obviously. And I said the other day that I didn't like the halftime show being political. Let me tell you, I don't like politicians politicizing the halftime show orders of magnitude more than I don't like the politicization of the halftime show, because I have the choice to tune in or tune out. I don't have to watch that stuff. I don't like Bad Bunny. I don't really care about him, right? But the government can force you to deal with them. They can fine you. They can put you in jail. And basically, that's what they're doing. But in the interesting, now let me just say, even if Bad Bunny were to have said everything they're accusing him of, I'd still be opposed to this.
Absolutely.
I'd still be opposed to the government, but they're just wrong. They're out there either dumb or lying. For God's sake, you people can't find a Spanish speaker to interpret for you? You just go based on what you've seen on social media? It's either they're dumb or dishonest. I ultimately don't know. And as, I would like, maybe you can address it. Ayn Rand hit the nail on the head in her essay, Have Gun Will Nudge. And she talked about it's always in the amorphous public interest, right? That's how they justify this garbage.
Yeah, correct. And their standard for judging what the public interest is has to be arbitrary on its face, especially when you consider a public like the United States of America that has such disparate values in each of the communities, Michael. I mean, as the article points out, on the one hand, you have Quakers, and on the other hand, you have, hyper liberal folks who have very, very different approaches to, values and what is good. And so determining what's in the public interest or in the public good becomes an impossible task. And so what they wind up doing is making the bureaucrat's judgment the arbiter. So whatever his whim happens to be at the moment is the standard that they use to determine whether something is or is not in the public interest. It's non-objective law, folks, and these are the kinds of laws that need to be immediately stricken from the books, even though there is precedent, Michael, I think going back to the early 70s, where a lot of this non-objective law was actually held up in the Supreme Court. Showing you folks that just because something has been held up in the Supreme Court or there's a legal precedent for it doesn't necessarily make it right, or doesn't necessarily make it that it should be a legal precedent. We have to get rid of these kinds of laws and these kinds of federal institutions, Michael, and that's what we do as a capitalist party. That organization, the Federal Communications Commission, would go. Costs $330 million a year to fund this thing. It costs the taxpayers $1 billion or so to conform to the regulatory process of the FCC. That's wealth siphoned away by the political class for no purpose other than to quell thought and to quell voices, particularly oppositional voices. So now we have Bad Bunny. But the only reason I watched the show, Michael, the halftime show, is because there was so much controversy about it. Yeah. I don't even know the guy. He's the biggest artist, I think, in the world right now, but I don't know his work.
Yeah. And
I don't really like his work either from what I saw, but
You know that he won based on all the commentary from the right-wing influencers trying to convince us that he did not. For instance, they comment, well, the Super Bowl was down 7 million or whatever it was viewers from last year. Okay, that's true. Last year was a record year, but he had the fourth highest of all time. But they don't point that out. They jump in. Oh, the TPUSA, what a success. 20 million viewers. Well, it had 6 million when it actually
Oh,
aired.
I thought it was actually 2. Okay, so it had
No,
6.
I was gonna say when it aired live, but according to Kid Rock, it was pre-recorded. Kid Rock ultimately threw TPUSA right under the bus because evidently what appeared to be him lip syncing. Now, if we believe him, I mean, who knows what we can believe? But his claim is that no, it was pre-recorded and the production team was unable to sync up his word, his mouth with the audio. So instead of just saying it was his fault and owning it, he throws the production team under the bus, puts it out there that this whole thing was pre-recorded, and at the same time says, he doesn't blame them. It's a hard job, this and that. So either he's a hack lip syncer who can't even lip sync right, or this was pre-recorded and the TPUSA production team couldn't get it right.
Yeah, it's like watching a soap opera, Michael. One of the things that I used to love about American history was that it was really about ideas, whereas European history seemed to be about families and conflict and which psychopath was going to gain control over the other psychopath's property and then dispense it to all his minions. And now we are closely aligning ourselves with that European drama of tribes versus tribes, irrational tribes versus irrational tribes. It's scary, man. We're in scary times. That said, Michael, do you want to get to the Trump on crime real quick?
In a second, but I do want to say it occurred to me over the last day or so, and I made a video about this morning. A lot of people say that, well, they don't like Trump or whatever, but he fights the left, and they want to beat the left. They want to beat woke, so they go and they side with Trump. Here's the thing: once you've sided with Trump, you've already lost. His character's garbage. The policies that he advocates are policies that some of them would have never advocated 10 years ago. Yes, I know, Akira Felix, that he was elected 10 years ago, but the constitutional conservatives, they did not back him initially. They ultimately supported him against Hillary, but they still weren't backing him like many do now. But for argument's sake, let's go back 12 years. They wouldn't have supported this stuff. And now they do. They're supporting a guy who tariffs, a guy who promises other citizens in other countries, if they protest, help is on the way, and then doesn't help them out. He has bought shares in companies. He's driven up the debt. He locked the country down. He wants to ban, or already has banned, corporations from buying housing. This is not a conservative, and you've sided with him, and you're getting a lot of the policies that the leftists wanted. Conservatives, you've lost. It's over. You've lost because you're not even fighting anymore. You've conceded by siding with Trump. And it reminds me of, Ayn Rand's essay from the 60s, Conservatism, an Obituary, because she called it. They're done. It's over with. I mean, it's not even, they've lost.
Akira, I wonder, though, they chose him over Ted Cruz. That's all you need to know. There was an election in California a while back, a recall election. Governor Gray Davis was on recall, and there were various candidates on the Republican side. I wanted a Tom McClintock, but generally the pundits on the right were shooting for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now they were going for him, and he eventually won the recall election. They were going for him because he was a marquee name, and I feel like in a sense we get this kind of star fucking mentality, Michael, where Ted Cruz is sort of big and has some kind of popularity within the party, but Donald Trump is a celebrity. And so they go for the celebrity status because they think that marquee name is going to bring a certain value to them and let them win elections. And so that's what's important to them. Just like Schwarzenegger winning the election in California was important to the Republicans, even though there was really nothing about him except the party name that was Republican. He did more to advance a leftist agenda than most leftists in this state. So I often wonder if that split was just more star fucking than, an ideological thing, to be honest with you.
I don't think so. I think that the initial Trump dynamic, because I remember the primary. There were like 19 candidates, and everybody has touted Trump's victory. He slayed 19 candidates. But the truth is, it was the fact that there were 19 candidates that allowed him to win, because the moderate vote was split, the conservative vote was split, and Trump took the populist part. He also, attracted people who hadn't previously voted into the equation, and some conservatives that wanted to beat the left went to Trump, and he was at like 40% for most of it. Cruz was winning some, but Rubio stayed in for Florida. Kasich stayed in for Ohio. By the time it was down to just Trump and Cruz, it was basically already over, right? So I don't know if it was necessarily the star power. I think that there are, the more
and he fought the left crassly, like he unembarrassedly.
Right. I mean, when you deal with a lot of these people that support Trump, they won't engage in discussion. They immediately, this morning, a guy, when I posted the thing I just read about, what Kid Rock's performance and the hypocrisy, he just comes on and says, "Oh, so you support grooming and, you support transvestite drag shows or for kids or something." There's no argument there. It's right away to insults. They like being vile. They think that that makes them good or so. I don't know what it is, but the people that do that, you're not good people. I'm sorry, you're just not. I don't know.
Yeah, you're not, because you're not thinking. You're just screaming for your team. You're adding to the noise, folks. You're not adding clarity to the argument, unfortunately, for us, because they're loud, Michael. They're loud, and they seem to be I think their numbers seem to be larger than they in fact are, because they're so loud. But c'est la vie. We are a voice crying in the wilderness, and one day we will be the voice that people will listen to. So Trump on crime, man. So Trump has been touting the drop in crime numbers as an achievement of the federal government. As
yes.
You want to say something? Oh,
no, I'm listening to you.
As an achievement of the federal government, since Trump has been in office, crime has dropped precipitously. This turns out not to be true. You want to talk about what was really going on?
Well, so first of all, there's so much here. So when the same stats in 2024 showed a sharp decline, Trump said it was fake news and it was all fake stats. There, this is just garbage. Now, when it says what he likes, he loves it. It's wonderful, and his policies are the result. It reminds me of when Obama was president and Trump said that the stock market was in a bubble, which I think he was right. But then when he was president, he says, "Look at the stock market, how wonderful it's doing because I'm president." So if you go back, I did a little digging this morning. You go back, the 80s and 90s saw super high crime rates, like off the charts. You then saw a decline to very low levels. In 2020, there was a dramatic spike in crime. It shot it up. Still not as high as it was in the 90s, but it was a very sharp increase. Interesting. Who was president in 2020?
Yeah, that's right.
It was the Donald.
Oh.
So if the president is to get all the credit, the president should get the blame. So, and then 2021, it kind of plateaued. It stayed high. 23 and 24, it started the decline that has now continued under Trump. So Trump is taking the credit for this. Now, granted, look, you militarized the streets like he did in D.C. I have no problem saying that probably helped the drop in crime. But what it reminds me of, Mark, when in Connecticut here, when Brett McCall and I were criticizing the prison system and the new policies that were implemented under the then Governor Daniel Malloy, what they were saying on television was, look at the recidivism rate is down and it's due to these policies. So I actually investigated, and it turned out that the recidivism rate had been dropping for some time. Actually, the drop slowed when Malloy took over and implemented his policies. So it went from like 67 to 63 or something like that, and then down to 61. So the rate of the decline actually slowed under Malloy. Now under Trump, it does seem to have actually sped up, but it's still part of a longer trajectory. And there are so many different explanations for why crime is high or why it's low. I mean, we could get into some of them, but to attribute it all, to put state crime and attribute it all to the guy in the White House is just silly. It would be silly to ascribe the increase in 2020 to Trump, and it would be just as silly to ascribe the decline to Trump.
Yeah, Michael, when you talk about federalizing the police in D.C. and how that might have contributed a little bit to a decrease in crime rates over there, well, I was talking to somebody who's a Chinese citizen a few months ago, and they're like, you could walk through the streets of Beijing. You don't have to worry about ever getting mugged. Well, sure, but what do you sacrifice for that? What do you sacrifice for the low crime rates in totalitarian states? You sacrifice your liberty. And it's the government who's the biggest criminal of all. The government who's watching you walk through those streets and making sure you don't do anything that doesn't conform to their ideology and that can imprison you or take your life at a whim. That's the real criminal that you have to watch for. So, yeah, when you bring military law down onto a civilian area, you're going to temporarily put a damper on crime because there's curfews, there's armed soldiers out on the street. You're less likely to, these guys who go and commit crimes that are just opportunistic. They see the place to do it. There's no guardian there to protect somebody. Well, they're going to commit a crime for sure, and they don't have the incentive to do that when the soldier's there. But what greater thing is sacrificed in the meantime? What greater thing is sacrificed in the meantime? Yes. So, the president cannot take responsibility for something that was already trending before he got into office and continues to trend in that direction, especially after disavowing those statistics. He can't now embrace them and say they're good statistics. Thank you for the $5. Is crime really down or reported crime down?
We get into this, but ultimately, if we're going to accept something, I mean, otherwise we just can't accept anything, right? If we don't accept the numbers, then I have no idea. I can't base it on, I don't know anybody that's been mugged in the last month or even the last year, for instance. I certainly haven't. So if I'm going to go just by my personal experience, I would say crime is at zero, violent crime. So I can't go by that. So what do I go by at this point? And you ultimately have to go by something if you're even going to have the discussion. And they do try to, what's the word I'm looking for here? Account for, different things. Like, I mean, you have self-reports, people who report that they've been the victim of a crime. They have the local police blotters. They have the local police reports. So there's various ways that they can measure these things. Is it perfect? No. But it's better than nothing, I would say. I mean, otherwise, like I said, you just cannot actually discuss it. Gary Menard says, super sticker, $4.99. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Very much, Gary.
Yeah, so I'm inclined to think that Trump is not responsible for almost any of the good things that are happening. He jumps on a bandwagon of trends, which he decries when he's being elected, but then embraces once he's elected, and those statistics seem to work in his favor. In other words, Trump lies, folks. I mean, he lies without apology. He doesn't even do it in a sophisticated way, like so many of the parasitic political class have learned to do. He's a grift that doesn't apologize for being a grift. And that's what's so extraordinary, Michael. He makes no apology for being a grifter.
Yeah, this morning I listened to this episode of the Tom Woods show this morning, and he had on two so-called libertarians, and they were talking about immigration. All three of them opposed to immigration. And, it just occurs to me, it's like why call yourselves libertarians at that point? Tom Woods said he's not concerned with defending libertarianism. He's concerned with defending the country, and closing the border, in essence, is the way to do that. Okay, then why identify as a libertarian? Just say what you actually are. And it's the same thing with the people that back Trump. You're not conservatives by any stretch of what the word ever meant. So why call yourselves that? But they do,
because they're able to cash in on that, Michael. Because most people presume that
suppose so.
conservative means the preservation of classical liberalism. Constitutional conservatism means they want to stick to a relatively originalist perspective of the Constitution. They're not going to step outside the bounds of the Constitution, and that's what enables them to sneak in. It's like a package deal, man.
I'll go with that.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about Trump and the tariff powers. So he had a conversation recently with the president of in Switzerland. Now, who I think he misnamed and didn't really know anything about the way Swiss government works. So,
well, say how. He said that he had a conversation with the prime minister.
With the prime minister, right? So he doesn't.
And his conversation was a woman. Two things: Switzerland doesn't have a prime minister, and the president is a guy, not a woman. He spoke to a woman who's like part of the cabinet or whatever they have over there. He just doesn't know what he's doing. I don't know how else to put it. But yes, he had. Oh, look at this. We got. Well, we'll address this in a second, but I want to address that he gave $10 from Rock Chartrand. I will answer your question shortly. But so he had this conversation with this woman. So what was the conversation?
Well, the conversation was he wanted to slap a 30% tariff on the Swiss because we have a $42 billion trade deficit with them. And he's upset about that. He wanted to equalize it somehow. So I guess he picked 30% out of his ass somehow. And that seemed like an appropriate figure that would at least remunerate the United States by half of what they're owed by the Swiss. But he did not like the conversation he had with poor Karen. She was aggressive. She was nice, but she was aggressive. And because she was aggressive, he decided to slap a 39% tariff on them.
Because of what she said.
The way the conversation went. Michael, I can only assume that she didn't kiss his ass, and that aggressiveness only meant that she was standing up for one, probably principle, and for her country's interests unapologetically, instead of bowing and scraping at the feet of the Donald. And he didn't appreciate that. She obviously hasn't learned what Zelensky and all the other leaders in Europe have learned, which is to first preface anything you want by copious ass kissing, and then you are likely to get what you want. But if you treat Donald Trump like the flawed, potentially psychopathic human being that he is, well, you're likely to get slapped with these arbitrary numbers. And in my opinion, he has no constitutional authority to carry out, although they have the pretense of legality. Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about how he justifies these things?
I just, first of all, want to point something out, because as I'm sitting here and I'm listening to the discussion and I'm thinking about what we said before, and it occurs to me how many people watching are saying, oh, these guys are leftist. Look at all they do is oppose Trump. But just look at on what we're opposing him, right? We're opposing violations of free speech. It's a constitutional issue, an individual rights issue. We're opposing tariffs in favor of free markets, things that were used to be Republican orthodoxy, right? And somehow when you now oppose that, you're a leftist. But there's two ways that he can justify this tariffs, his tariffs by the executive rather than going through Congress. And they are, if it's an emergency situation, national security, or an economic emergency, neither of which we are currently in. I don't know how they would help in an economic emergency. They would hurt anyway. But how is it in a national emergency of economic or security when Trump's feelings get hurt by the way a foreign politician talks to him? I would love for somebody to please explain that to me, because it obviously is not. He's not playing 4D chess. He's not a genius. He's a petulant man-child. That's who's running the country, and there are an abundance of people out there who are cheering him on. I saw, maybe it was Eric Erickson, who said that the reason that Trump never sort of recalibrates and fixes himself is because the base does not hold him accountable. They will not hold him accountable for anything. And that seems to be largely
Well,
the
they
case.
seem to hold him accountable for Jeffrey Epstein.
Some, yes, some no.
But one wonders why that and not, so many other things.
Well, they've become obsessed with this idea that pedophiles are running the world.
Pedophiles and lizard people, folks, are running the world, and I'm sure that's going to be the subject of Candace Owens' next show. So the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 is one of the ways in which he justifies this, Michael, as you said. Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, which was, I guess, passed in 1962. The law lets the president impose tariffs or trade restrictions of imports that threaten to impair national security. Now, as you said, it boggles the mind in a way to understand how imposing restraints of trade somehow is better for national security than not, other than the fact that you think, well, there's certain industries that need to be completely domestically manufactured if we are to maintain national security, like the chip issues and stuff like that. But they're using it for stuff that are capital inputs, Michael, like steel and aluminum, things that are now raising the price of these capital inputs, which is raising the cost for businesses, even startups. If you wanted to bring manufacturing back to this country, which I think is not necessarily an ideal. I think we're too rich for that, but he thinks harkening back to some golden age, some non-existent golden age is where we need to be. You don't put a tariff on steel and aluminum, the things with which you use to build these buildings and infrastructure in the first place, because you're raising the cost of doing business and prohibiting this manufacturing from actually coming here and building infrastructure here. So I don't see how that works for the overall quote unquote good, when in fact that restraint of trade makes the cost of living for all of us and the cost of doing business far more expensive. Also, there's a section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 allows the president to act unilaterally against, now listen to this, Michael, quote, unfair trade practices by foreign countries. What the fuck is that?
It's economic illiteracy. So, it's not understanding what tariffs are and what tariffs do. Tariffs are a tax on the companies that are importing the goods into the country. They are not a tax on foreign governments or on foreign companies.
But Michael, when China produces steel and they send it here to the United States and they're able to produce it cheaper than any domestic producer, the politicians call it dumping. They call it product dumping. And They act as if that is a vice. But what's happening when we're getting that steel more cheaply? And they say we're getting it cheaply because the Chinese are cheating. They're cheating because they subsidize these industries. But does that should that bother us?
No, because we end up with cheaper goods. With cheaper goods, with more goods, cheaper. It's good for production. It's good for the companies that are buying this stuff. They can expand, they can hire, that sort of thing. Now, of course, you have creative destruction. Some companies are going to lose out. They should lose out. If they can't compete in a free market, they should lose out. If the problem, which it is in a lot of cases, is of the government policy of, restrictions, of regulations, of minimum wage laws, that sort of thing, then you got to get rid of that stuff. You don't make it worse by putting tariffs on the stuff coming into the country. You roll the stuff back. It's like the argument against immigration. Well, you have to get rid of the welfare state first. Okay, well then let's argue for that rather than arguing for immigration restrictions, because arguing for immigration restrictions is going the wrong way, just as getting tariffs is going the wrong way.
I mean, this is a good segue, Michael, into the next little bit.
Well, I want to address, because you just said there was a fictional past when they believe there was a utopia of some sort. And Rock says, are we really in the best time ever, or has the political class made things worse since 9/11? Despite all the new tech, maybe it's nostalgia, but the 90s felt better in certain ways. There's a quote that I looked up right when I saw that from you. And the quote is from a guy named, it's usually attributed to the columnist Franklin Adam Pierce. And it's nothing is more responsible for the good old days than a bad memory. And I'm not going to argue that there's some things that, culturally are probably worse than they were then. But usually the case is that it's a bad memory. It's like, how many of us remember all the good times that we had out drinking with our buddies in high school, as opposed to all the times you spent vomiting in back at your buddy's house and woke up with a headache and couldn't get out of bed? We tend not to remember that. I tell a story often about this time I took LSD. And I ended up getting into an argument with a friend of mine. I had a bad trip, and I laugh and oh yeah, haha. But that was one of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced in my life. But in retrospect, I can glorify it, and most of it is that. Personally, I find the advent of the iPhone that I have now and all the things that I can do on it marvelous compared to what I was doing in the 90s. Now, part of that is, in the 90s, I was in prison for the last part of them. But before that, I was on drugs. I was on alcohol. I was doing all kinds of things I couldn't do. I was miserable. So it's hard for me to assess in that way. But I'm very skeptical whenever somebody tells me about the good old days. Like the Tom Woods podcast I just saw. He talks about, when you watch the game shows from the 50s, you could just see that life was better. By what standard?
Yeah, not by really any objective standard. So again, that's nostalgia, because by objective standards, Michael, our standard of living is so much higher than it was then. Right now in the 50s, no individual had access to all the information of the world as he does today. In your iPhone or your Samsung Android, you have a more powerful computer than ever existed in any corporate institution in the United States of America in the 1950s. You have more information at your beck and call than any scholar. You have as much information as the Library of Congress, for crying out, right in the palm of your hand. That is an incredible amount of potential wealth. And now with AI, you have an even greater potential, Michael, to increase the productivity of the individual. So I think both things are sort of right at the same time, right? We understand that, our freedoms are slowly being eroded by the political class, while at the same time, technology is increasing at such a pace as to outdo some of the negative impacts of what the political class is doing. So it's as if, our economy, our economics, and our productivity and innovation is still high enough to outpace the bad shit that's going on, and to make this, frankly, the best time to ever be alive. And I know it's really weird saying that, but it was Steven Pinker that really turned me on to that, who made me realize that, shit, what's going on objectively is not what I see in the news. We're actually in the least violent times in history. Violent times in history, even though the news makes us feel we are imperiled just by stepping outside our door. The Republicans certainly want you to feel that without them, you step out your door, you're going to be mugged or murdered or raped. Not the case, folks. It is simply not the case.
Gary Menard, thank you for the $1.99 super chat. He says a quote, moratorium on independent brains, unquote, with a question mark. Thank you, Gary.
Indeed. I think there is.
So now I forgot whatever the hell I was going to say.
Well,
I wanted to piggyback off what you just said.
Yeah.
My grandmother used to spend all her time watching television, right? She didn't go out. She was bedridden, just watch TV. And her interpretation of what the world was like was so skewed. I'd go outside and she'd say, make sure to lock the doors. And she was just thought that this world was this place where crime was around every corner. And it just wasn't the case. But that's what she thought because she watched the news. And we do have to be very careful about not thinking that the news is representative of everything. It's like social media is not representative of everything. When I go out, I'm not running into crazy leftists and crazy Trumpists everywhere I go. It doesn't happen. I mean, I do know them, but it's not everywhere. So, I always bring this up. I probably mentioned it here, but it very much matters, or it's very relevant, I think. I think it was 2000. And almost every day on the news, there was a report of a shark attack. And I remember thinking, oh my God, like, what's up with all these shark attacks? People keep getting attacked by sharks. And lo and behold, at the end of the summer, it was tabulated, and it turned out there were less shark attacks that year than other years. But that's what the media chose to focus on. So because it was salient, it made it seem more common.
And Michael, I mean, after Jaws, which terrified me and ruined my life, by the way.
Well, you're kind of a wuss. We know that.
I am. I am. In fact, I was on a panel discussion with a bunch of supernatural actors, and they were talking about Steven Spielberg and what an amazing filmmaker he was, and how benevolent he was, and what a great influence he was on their lives. I'm like, seriously? He made the monster movie that fucked my life up for good. Like after Jaws, I mean, look, after Jaws, I still became a certified diver, and I still went to the beach and did all that stuff. But it terrified the fuck out of me. And there was a social contagion going on for a while right after Jaws came out, where people were hunting down great white sharks. They literally had to make like the area around the Farallon Islands a sanctuary for great white sharks. And now they're all over the place, these great white sharks. But you come to realize that they're not the monsters that everybody that Steven Spielberg made us feel they were. They're actually rather benign and frightened, even though they're a 36-foot long, 3,000-pound carnivorous fish. You have less to worry about them when you're out there surfing or paddle boarding or doing whatever you're doing out there in the water. You don't have to worry about great white sharks really at all. It's a very rare phenomenon when they attack you. But if you were tuned into all the Jaws stuff, and if you're tuned into the hysteria that took place after Jaws, then you would think they were attacking people left and right, and they simply don't. So you're right on that. I wanted to answer something from Jenna. She asked, the 74, was that Nixon or Ford? That's sort of on the cusp, because I think Nixon was out somewhere in August or September of 74. So, I blame a lot of bad legislation on Ford, though, to be honest with you, because I think he was a terrible mixed bag of.
Was Ford the first guy you voted for?
No.
Well, did you serve in NAM, Mark?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Although I was born at the very beginning of American involvement in Vietnam. So that was in April of 1965 when we sent Marines over to I-Corps, right in the north area there, and that's when I was born. So I was born at the beginning of the formal hostilities with Vietnam. So a little too young to be serving in the steamy jungles, my friend. Robert gave us $5. Thank you, Robert. You want to post that?
I can't see it. I got to go find it.
Oh, am I actually? It's
Where's
up a
Robert?
little bit.
There it is.
He's above Gary.
Yes, $5 from Robert. Thank you, Robert. He says, Tariffs, Preezy Mick Apprentice has put a tariff on independent thought and action. Try to think in outside the left-right dichotomy, and you will pay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times people assume a position of mine because I criticize one side. They'll tell me I must support all this other stuff. When we did an episode the other day and I criticized the Bad Bunny halftime show, I was basically accused of being a racist who just doesn't want to hear the opinions of brown people. And then I criticized the right for their handling of the Bad Bunny situation, and I'm accused of being a pedo protector and a approver of transvestite drag shows for children. It's really an insane world. I'm so happy that my mind doesn't work like that, that I'm not stuck in that tribal milieu. It's very gross.
Open mouth, out comes bromide, mind goes off. That's exactly they hear phrases, Michael, that trigger them, and then the brain shuts off and a stream of unconscious dialogue comes spurting out of their mouths. Look, I want to show you something. Jeanette, 1979, says, we went to Daytona Beach right after that movie. Okay? She was terrified to go in the water. I'll tell you something, Jeanette, you wouldn't have had to worry about great white sharks at Daytona Beach. You would have had to worry about bull sharks. Bull sharks really do attack more people than great white sharks. They're the ones you have to worry about, Michael, because they also can go in fresh water. So they will swim from the ocean upstream into a freshwater river. our estuary. So my fear of sharks, even in pools, seems justified under those conditions. Yes, I feared sharks even in pools when I was a kid. When I was small.
What,
Okay.
like 17?
Yeah. Michael, do you have anything more to say? We have something about. I think we have a bonus article to talk about, and I think it's important to talk about this stuff because we get so much bullshit with respect to what immigrants are, who they are, what they're doing in the United States of America. And if you defend immigration and open borders, you're considered anti-American, Michael. You're considered somebody who wants to distill and dilute Americanism. You're not a patriot. You're a bad guy. What's so funny?
No, I'm not. I don't know what I was thinking about something, and I don't even remember. Oh, did you like how I called it a bonus article when I sent it to you?
Yeah, yes, I did. Am I missing something?
No, I don't know what I was thinking, and it made me smile. And then you asked. I wasn't going to say
Oh,
anything, but then you asked. So what was I going to say? Never mind. I just figured I'd tell you. I didn't know it was going to turn into a whole thing.
so Michael, we hear all the time that immigrants, are mostly composed of criminals, rapists, psychopaths, gang members, drug dealers. This is what is going over the border. Now, forget that I heard a story of a Chinese family that came over, and they came over through they took a trip to Mexico because they couldn't get into America by any legal means, and they did that hard trek through the jungles, and the deserts, which is extremely dangerous, and made it into the United States. And all they wanted was a life of liberty, Michael. They just wanted to be able to be free to realize their potentials. They didn't want to parasitize the American government or the American citizen. They just wanted to be free of Chinese oppression. And you know what? More often than not, especially in a free society, that kind of immigration is promoted by an open society, by a free immigration world, as opposed to the welfare state that we have now, which could incentivize a certain type of person to come over the border, where they're going to receive benefits and parasitize the country. But this is the stereotype that the Republicans try to pin on all immigrants. But this isn't true, is it?
No, it's not. Now, let me just start off by giving my position on immigration. I am for relatively open borders. I think a case can be made to have checking points so that you can check if somebody is a criminal or has a contagious disease of some sort. Other than that, I'm for open borders, and the case is threefold. One, individual rights. People have the right to hire whom they want, and people have the right to work for whom they will whoever will hire them. People have the right to travel on highways. People have the right to walk on property that is not private, such as the border, and to be on property that is private if the person will have them. And to stop people from coming here violates their rights. You're initiating force against them, and you're also violating the rights of the businesses that want to hire them, the customers that want to patron them. So that's the first point. The second is constitutional. The Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, does not delegate Congress the authority to regulate immigration. It simply does not. It's just not in there. The third thing is economic. And immigrants, by and large, are a net benefit to the country economically. In the short run, they may displace some low-level workers, but in the long run, it's a net benefit to the country. There are arguments like, well, they commit such high levels of crime. No, it's not true. They commit lower levels of crime than, generally speaking, than native-born Americans. Then there's this argument that they consume large amounts of welfare. Now, I've known for quite some time they actually pay more into the system than what they take out on net. What this article here does from Cato is shows that along most metrics, based on the data, and they concede in the article their data set is limited, but based on the data that they have, the immigrants actually get less, in every demographic, less welfare than Americans. I think there's one, like if you're in the upper percentile, the top quadrant of income earners, the immigrants actually get more Medicaid or Medicare in that quadrant than otherwise. But by and large, they're getting less welfare than native-born Americans.
One of the things that some of the conservative pundits say, Michael, is that what people like us are advocating for is an underclass of people who come into the country to do menial labor. So what we're essentially advocating for is an almost serf-like condition for the immigrant. What do you say to people like that? Like Laura Ingraham will say shit like that on Fox News all the time.
What I say is they don't actually engage the arguments, right? So if people come in here and can only do menial labor, so what? You might have a child that can only do menial labor. So should you not be allowed to have children because of that? And what about the immigrants that are entrepreneurs?
Mm-hmm.
Or what about the immigrants that are willing to do work somebody else doesn't, so they free that person up to go do something else, maybe start a business? Who knows? I mean, it's just, it's silly, the arguments that they make, but the bottom line is, how do you stop immigration without violating rights and without violating the Constitution? And they simply don't address that. They come up with, they're going to destroy the culture. That's the one of the favorite ones.
That's
They're
the
gonna
big
destroy the culture. That's been the argument since the beginning. Since
Well,
the start of the country.
That's based on the blood and soil concept of what American culture is. And we talk about that all the time.
Right. You don't preserve your culture by destroying its foundations. And the foundations of America are the belief in individual rights, constitutional government, laissez-faire capitalism, and you do not save that by destroying them.
Sometimes also, Michael, some of these laws actually put some of these immigrants in these what Americans would consider not preferred scenarios, where they have to work in sort of the black market sometimes, or they have to work for less than what would be considered a minimum wage, in part because the government won't let them work, or they've barred them from getting the kind of labor that they are actually capable of doing. I've known East Indian cab drivers who actually have doctorates in chemistry. Now, they can't get a job in the field that they are actually an expert in, because America demands a certain amount of certification, or demands they have to hop through some bureaucratic hoops in order to achieve the same status that they have in this other country, which I think is horrible. But I also think, when you're talking about this, you have to be thinking about the context of the person who's engaging in the transaction for that job, and that it's probably better than where they've come. And it is a step up for them, right. Even if it's not preferred for you, it's preferred for them. And
absolutely.
And that, all of us start at menial labor, Michael. All of us start in the job not doing very sophisticated stuff.
Well, I mean, look, you were born on the Supernatural set,
right?
Working there as Lucifer. Right. That's where you just appeared, like, what's her name? Athena, out of the head of Zeus. You just sort of popped up on the set.
Yeah, or Venus, out of the foam of the ocean. That's exactly what happened. It didn't take 10 years of working hard and working 5 jobs at a time and Michael, working until 4 a.m. on a Friday and then going to class at 9 in the morning to study acting. No, it didn't have anything to do with that. But you know what? That's what immigrants are doing. They're coming from a worse place to a better place.
All right.
And everybody should be allowed to do that. It's a right to improve your situation, to move from a worse place to a better place.
Persephone, did we reach our goal? How far are we? Post it so people can know while I give this capitalist thought of the day. Capitalist thought of the day, even though Mark owes about 20 of them, I will give it today. Free speech. Free speech is very, very important. I probably touched on this recently, but I'll touch on it again. It's fine. As much as we criticize the right-wing influencers and sometimes the left-wing ones that I'm learning about that I didn't previously know, they have the right to speak, and they have the right to share their views, and we have the right to criticize those views. I would not want the government to silence them. Interestingly, some of them want the government to silence others. That is not the answers, folks. If we want to prosper as a nation, as individuals, we need to embrace individual rights. And that includes the right to freedom of speech. We are 2 super chats or super stickers away from reaching our goal for the day. While Mark asked a question, just know that is the case, folks.
Yeah, folks, open discourse. That is how we stay healthy. We stay a rational society. by leaving communication open. You need to engage with people who think, who have different values than you, because that makes us healthier, to see the engagement between two opposing values so we can decide for ourselves which is better. Something came through, Michael. I can't see it because
$5 from Jenna Kleem.
Thank you, Jenna. You are a lifesaver. So my question for everybody is, do you think Trump should be impeached? Do you think Trump should be impeached? Make sure you go to...
I think we just asked that the other day, Mark. You got to come up
Did
with something
you?
new. No,
Did
somebody
you?
did. Someone did, yeah.
Do you think that...
I think you did, as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken.
Did I? Do you think... I don't think I did, but it's probably on record that I did, because that's the way it rolls. Do you think the president should have sweeping powers to impose tariffs on other countries? Yes or no? And if you want to elaborate on that, please do. Go to the YouTube channel and make sure you answer that question. Also, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel before you leave. Make sure you tell your friends about it, because individualism and individual rights needs to be the dominant moral philosophies out there, and they simply aren't, but we want to make it that way. We want to make it sexy again, folks. So we'll be here tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. You got 23 hours to check your premises, folks.
Well, we got it. We hit the gold.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wait till Mark finds out what we have to do. Okay. Check out Everyday Ethics at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time today. We'll have a great discussion once again. Thank you for all the super chats and super stickers. And what do they got to do till tomorrow, Mark?
You got to go in peace, folks. Peace.
No, that's not what you say at the end.
I already said check the premises.
No, you didn't just say it. You say it at the end.
Okay, that's what I got to do. All right, folks, remember to check your premises. Peace.